Functional performance physical therapy is not your traditional physical therapy. When people think about physical therapy, they usually think about overcoming pain and injury. This is true with functional therapy, but it takes everything to a whole nother level. When you look at functional therapy, they're taking into consideration asking the question, why? Why is this happening in the first place? So when we look at traditional therapy, there's a time and place for it, but many times it's often monotonous, meaning you're kind of going through the same motions. I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, I actually had a knee injury that kept leading into therapy. So what ended up happening is we do the same exercises over and over, either laying on the table, sitting on the bike, and whereas it helped some, all the exercises were focused right on the knee. But then I started to realize the pain wasn't going away. So what ended up happening was led into a surgery. The surgery helped actually overcome some of the pain, but then there's always that tendency to have that same issue of limited strength or limited ability to go through certain exercises or performance related to the sport that I was doing. So when we start to think about it and we look at the difference of functional and performance therapy versus just traditional therapy, we want to look at the question and ask the question, why? Why does this happen in the first place? What is causing this? And what can I do to overcome it to actually go back to the sport or the activity that I'm wanting to do? So in this case, whether you're an athlete or maybe you're doing a certain activity such as traveling, or just in general, you're an active person or it has to do with your job, either way, we want to relate it to that activity. So when you're going through the therapy, you're going through the exercises, you want to look at not just the area that may be hurting or that it was injured, but the surrounding area. And then you start to relate it to the activities that you're doing or that you're going to get back to. Or maybe you have a certain goal. Maybe you're a runner and you're wanting to increase your distance. Say you go from running 5Ks to now your goal is a half marathon or a marathon. It doesn't matter the situation. What matters is that you're actually understanding why the conditions happen in the first place, what to do to overcome it, and how to actually progress forward. So when we look at this, we want to think about three main areas to focus on when you're overcoming a certain injury, maybe a pain, or just in general, you have a certain goal related to some kind of physical activity. The first is going to be the movement. So when I actually think back on that knee, and as far as the pain that I was experiencing or the inability to go play a certain sport, understanding, yes, there's certain mechanics of how that knee works as far as alignment goes and the strength around it, but the tendencies, we were doing all the exercises just at the knee. We weren't looking around the other areas that were utilized in these other activities. So for example, at the time I was big into playing sports such as running, soccer, football, baseball, weightlifting, and it wasn't just the knee that I was using with all these activities. There was the ankle involved, there was the hip involved, the whole area of the body. So I started thinking a little bit deeper, especially when going through workouts. It wasn't just what was happening at the knee, but if I had limited movement at the ankle or limited movement at the hip, it was restricting what I could do as far as the knee goes. Meaning if the ankle was tight or the hip was tight, then I was putting more force or pressure on my knee when going through the actual motions. So when we look at movement, this is super key, meaning you have to understand that our body is from head to toe connected. And when we have limited movement or certain restriction points throughout the body, a certain area is going to have to work up, meaning work harder or compensate for the other areas that aren't moving as well. So when we take that in consideration as far as the movement goes, you can improve your injury or your pain or discomfort you're experiencing by understanding how to utilize other parts of the body by improving the movement, thus distributing more force throughout the body. It takes a lot of pressure off that site that you're experiencing the injury, and this is really common on any injury. When you think about especially someone who has low back pain, neck pain, they're just restriction points, meaning there's something else in the body that is not lining up right that's adding things to add extra compression to that area, thus the extra pain that you're experiencing. So movement's very key. The second part was the performance or the activity. So I started looking at this and I was thinking, whether it was a certain lift that I was wanting to do or maybe a certain run or just in general related to that sport at the time, again, I was trying to relate it to that activity. So if I went back to that traditional therapy and thought about the exercises I was doing at the time, a lot of it was just either laying on the mat or sitting on a bike. And again, nothing wrong with certain activities at a certain place and time, but if there's not a progression, there's no relationship going forward to something that's a little bit more intense or more active. Because let's just be honest, if you're actually trying to get back to a certain sport or a certain activity, and whether it's the actual act of the sport itself or the physical activity, you have to think about the movements that you're doing with it. And the reality was I wasn't just laying on a table in this sport or this activity. So I was limited on what I was actually getting that joint to experience, whether it's the movement part, whether it's the flexibility of the muscles, the strength, or just in general the balance, because I wasn't training for that specific activity that I was wanting to go toward. So it's very important to understand, either from a performance side, again, if you're not an athlete, this is not has to be related to athletics, but just being physically active, meaning you're moving, you're using your muscles, and you're active toward a certain goal. And so looking at that, you want to train for that. So once you get under control the movement phase, meaning you have a good movement of the joints, good flexibility of the muscles, good strength and balance, then you can progress to the performance side to where you're really training for that specific activity. Now, this can be even more so when you're looking at it from a deeper level, and this is where the functional therapy comes into place, and understanding how the body mechanics work, but how the body works in general. So the physiology. So we want to think about the muscles, and we want to think about how they're contracting. So we start to relate to nervous system, you start to relate to the blood flow, your cardiovascular system, and how this all plays, because nutrition is very key. A lot of people may experience joint pain, inflammation, maybe weakness, their inability to get certain strength in their gains, or just in general keep a good lean muscle mass on their body. They may be trying to lose weight. Either way, these are either symptoms that they're experiencing that they're trying to overcome, or it's a certain goal that they're trying to achieve. And so when you start to really look at this from a functional therapy standpoint, this is really key even with your injury. I know, for example, a lot of the traditional therapy, nothing is ever taught or even explained to patients when it comes to the health, the diet, the foods they're eating. Because a lot of foods, as what people may think is healthy for them or not, are actually robbing them of a lot of certain minerals or certain key vitamins, micronutrients that are important for actually the health of that joint or the contraction of that muscle, or just in general to speed up the process of how things heal. So when you understand this, it actually takes your whole game to a whole nother level. And this is key for someone who is either an athlete or maybe you're a business professional and you want to get the best out of your results. So instead of just kind of wasting your time and going through the motions, you're being more intentional, you're more thoughtful and understanding how the body works and then connecting the dots. So this is really good when it comes to the performance side, because you said when you're wanting to be functional and you want to relate it to how well you perform, you understand how to connect the dots. And the third piece is going to be recovery, because this is all what we're here for, is understanding how to not only recover but maintain that lifestyle, meaning of activity, functional movement. So this is where we start to look at the different modalities. Now, yes, these are used a lot in traditional therapy, but at the end of the day, it's understanding how to utilize it again to your best as far as your function, the activity you're trying to get to. So when I look at maybe certain simple modalities, using certain things such as hot and cold, but here's where we become a little bit more strategic and speed it up, because what we're looking at is now at a more functional level of meaning how the body works at the cellular level. So then you can start to add in hyperbaric as far as oxygen therapy, ozone to help speed up the healing of the cell, also just in general anti-aging, detoxification, skin health, overall just what people are looking for, but understanding it from a deeper meaning, how it actually relates to your body when it comes to the recovery aspect. So when we look at different modalities at the cellular level, you can even tack in certain things such as pulse electric magnetic field. Our cells, which are electrical, have electrical membrane, so it's a positive, negative charge. So if you understand this, you're ahead of the game, because now you can go in there, activate those cells, or get rid of the bad cells to now allow those nutrients, maybe the healthy foods you're eating, maybe the supplements you're taking, maybe the ozone that you're getting in. Either way, you're allowing the nutrients to get into that cell to speed up the healing, but then also speed up the recovery. So you see where I'm going with this? Being functional, being intentional is a lot faster approach than just laying on the mat, going through the traditional exercises and hoping it works, right? So we want to go in there and also look at something else, maybe such as infrared sauna, because there's different layers of the body. So when we start looking at the layers of the body, we want to think about superficial, what's happening around the skin, the fascia. The fascia is highly innervated, so a lot of people may have a lot of tension, tightness throughout the day, and there's all those nerve endings, receptors right into the nervous system. You look a little bit deeper, what's happening at the layers of the muscles. There's different muscle groups, how they are able to line up, contract to give you that strength. Again, depending on your sport and your activity, you can look at this on the recovery side and say, is this how often am I doing my workouts, but also how often do I need to do certain recovery things to speed up the healing of the body, so that again you're ready and prepared to go for the next event. And then you look at a little bit deeper as far as at the joint, the inflammation. What does that look like when it comes down to the inflammation of the body, the alignment, and how are things connected when it comes to us trying to get the most out of our exercise. So you're tapping into the functional side, you're tapping into the performance side of therapy, and again, you're going to want to understand the difference between the two. There's a place and time, but for the most part, if you're an active person, if you're a business professional, and again, you want to relate these two together and understand how it benefits you the most, you want to connect the dots. You understand how the nervous system works, you understand how the cardiovascular system works, and also the musculoskeletal system. And then you bring them together, the three main systems. Once you understand this, you're ahead of the game, because now you have a better game plan, a better approach, and a roadmap to actually improve speed up, because you're playing the parameters of time, the intensity, but also just length. How long is it gonna take me to get to where I need to be? What's the time frame? What do I need to achieve a certain activity? Because again, if you're taking what you just did, traditional therapy, and then trying to relate it to today's activity, what you're going to be involved in, where's the connection? There's not. A lot of times, just again, laying there and doing some basic stuff can be a good initial start, especially if you're post-surgery, because there is the game that we want to play of getting the body prepared and in a healthy and also safe manner. But at the same time, we don't want to go in there and we want to prepare the body to be able to go do the higher intensity level activities. And I know this is right away, going back to the surgery I had, I was going, if I would have known this, it would have been a lot different as far as the outcome, but at the end of the day, nothing was working. So what ended up happening was going through the same exercises over and over that were just the table exercises, some of the basic stuff sitting on the bike, which again is still important, but there was no progression back to the relationship of the activity that I was doing. So what ended up happening was just led into surgery. So this could have definitely been an avoided surgery, and this was not probably a necessary surgery, and especially on both knees. But at the end of the day, because the therapy wasn't working and because the exercises were too, I would say, basic for the activity that I was wanting to do, there was not a connection between the two. So then the surgery ended up being the next recommended, which I see a lot of people end up doing now, is they kind of go through the basics on the therapy as far as their exercises, and all of a sudden those aren't working, which we know, because it's not congruent and it's not relational to the activity that you're trying to do in the first place. So understand the place and time for certain things, but understand that if you're an active person and you're really trying to get the most out of your activity, you want to look into functional and performance therapy, and you want to see how this can improve your overall human function performance, because you're an active person and you want to live that way, so you want to train that way, but you want to be in the right direction, not just doing the basics, because if not, again, what ends up happening is your results are slow, things are not where they're wanting to go, but you're not going to get the result that you want.